Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. We are also fueled by college football. Week 0 in the books. Week 1 up ahead. Josh Pate, we put out the bat signal. It is no longer, I had to change the bat signal because all the logos and stuff have changed for Pate. So we had to make some adjustments. We had to call the engineering staff. And
it's a train now.
We had to literally the engineering staff. We had to throw up the logo.
The train signal.
The train signal. For Josh Pate of Josh Pate's College Football Show, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you haven't done it already in advance of college football season, you're a fool. Do it now. Hey, buddy.
This is the hardest I've ever worked in my life. Because I don't live a very hard life. And I don't know if you've ever been through one of these good old-fashioned brand switches. Now, it coincides with taking ownership of the product, so that's a good thing. So no one's complaining, on air at least. Off air during commercial, we complained constantly. But it is a heavy lift, man. You never know how many places your name is until you do a full comb of the internet and trademarking and all this stuff I don't understand. So it's been a nightmare, but also a good kind of nightmare. The nightmare where you wake up and you say, I'm better for that. I'm better for that. Now, Florida State fans, you were talking about Cannell. I was out on the street listening.
So
Cannell,
excited to trash Cannell.
Yes, I'm so excited for this transition. Different kind of nightmare. You don't understand. I have a personal relationship with this man. I work alongside him. I heard the caller call in. Cannell's my dumbest person or thing in sports every week, and I have to tell him to his face. The beauty of Cannell is he's one of the best people you'll ever meet. One of the nicest people you'll ever meet. The smile is not fake. It may look smug, but it is permanent. It's always there. So you can just yell in his face. You can make fun of his mom. It doesn't matter. It's always there. And so the good thing about Cannell is, as disgusted as you may be with him, you can tell him. You don't have to hide it. You can tell him. And I, as a surrogate, act for all of the listeners and viewers, and I'm happy to tell him.
He routinely has battles with 3HL. And Don Davenport,
Cannell,
our afternoon crew.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Very much some SEC versus ACC battles that are very fun to listen to.
So week 0 plays out the way that it does for Florida State. Let's start there before we advance into the real meat of college football with all these great week 1 matchups that we have on the table. The way that Norvell handled the opening drive and the 2-point conversion, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts were bad because I thought, here we go. I thought everyone had been taking the week leading up to the game to comment on the stuff I had posted that there was going to be a hangover from the Orange Bowl and how this Florida State team had been gutted and blah, blah, blah. So then, of course, working through the script, they looked great. And I thought it was just kind of a message he felt like he needed to send. So then we got out of that, and then we entered standardized football, and it quickly went downhill. But the whole Florida State thing, I went on the show the next night. I said some stuff that I think ended up being incorrect. Because here's what stood out to me. What stood out to me is we had Pete Thamel go on College Game Day and say, hey, I'm hearing from people in the know, they expect this to be maybe the best defensive line in the country. We had a lot of people in the Florida State contingent, the media contingent, that were very high on that. So when you see that in the NFL game, the thing's open. You guys get to go watch. In college, that's not always the case. So when you hear a familiar chorus being sung by everyone around a program, and then that thing doesn't end up playing out, most of the time what's happened is practices are closed. There's no tangible information to be had. The only info you get is intel from inside the program. And if it's all wrong, that means people in the program did not have a firm grasp on the football team. That's a bad thing. So I thought that's what happened. Well, then throughout the day, Monday and yesterday, I'm talking to a lot of people, NFL scouts, and also people inside the media beat down there. And they said, hey, FYI, Norvell has it wide open for us. We get to go to practice. Like, if anything, we just whiffed on what we thought we were seeing. But the NFL guys said the same thing. The NFL guys have been through there during fall camp. They swore, man, personnel-wise, they're not taking a back seat. They're really good. So what I think happened is they were right, and their eyes just got misled. Because if you go to one of these practices, I was down at Miami a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how they'll be as a football team this year. You watch those practices, those kinds of athletes, you're at an NFL camp every fall and whatnot. So you see this stuff. If the average person were to see that, they'd be dumbfounded by length and athleticism and explosiveness and whatnot. Well, that's not what makes a football player. Okay, you cannot evaluate the mind. You cannot evaluate the heart that it takes to actually compete and stick your face in the fan on 3rd and 2, 4th and 1. And that's what Florida State didn't have. So they got all the talent in the world, just the requisite amount of football players ready to do more than just trot out there with a spear on the side of their helmet. Not there. And then you follow that up and you ask, okay, well, how did that talent get acquired? A lot of it's via the portal, which is yet another cautionary tale that it may be penny wise, pound foolish to just think you can stack talent out of that transfer portal, because if you claim you're trying to build a culture and you're building everything as part of that culture and the transfer portal are probably not going to mesh to a high degree long term. It's the big Colorado question, for example. Can you build a program from the portal? I don't think you can, and I think they really have to upgrade their high school recruiting apparatus at Florida State.
Well, and I think, and college football fans who pay far more close attention to this than your casuals, right, will understand your point. The importance of building this thing organically, the same way that we talk about on the NFL side of things, right? There's a difference between going out mercenary style and putting your team together in free agency.
Like the Titans have this offseason.
Sure, out of necessity because of how far in the dumpster their actual roster was, because they had failed in 3 consecutive drafts to recoup that talent organically. But the draft is how you build competitive football teams for longevity. And in the same way, college football coaches know this probably, but are just going to have to take some risks here. And I feel like that's the position that Mike Norvell was in. I don't want to excuse it, because there is still that the onus is on coaching, because you put together the team. It's your job to get them moving in the right direction. And it's hard to get that many young people's attention all moving in the same direction.
It's really hard to do.
But
really
I just think that there is pressure on coaches to have to do it that way, or at least take some risks that they might not otherwise be comfortable taking because of where we are in the nature of college football.
It is feast or famine, too, because I guarantee you this weekend, you're going to watch a top 10 or 15 team, could be Miami, for example. That's a team. Ole Miss is a team that loaded up from the transfer portal. One of them will have knocked it out of the park, like Florida State last year. They were put together the same way last year. The point is, it is such a feast or famine sort of high risk, high reward proposition, in that you're going to get more variance in outcome, as opposed to traditional recruiting where you put your roster together the way Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State do. There is no world where those teams are losing 4 games. They're just there every year.
At Josh Pate CFB is where you follow him. You can subscribe to Josh Pate's College Football Show Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday via the YouTube channel.
So, speaking of teams that build in recruiting and supplement in the portal, it feels like Tennessee has hit a groove of trying to do that as they roll into this season. Recruiting momentum is high for the future, 2025 and beyond. But for 2024, you've talked a lot about Tennessee on your show very recently. When you picture a ceiling for this team, because we've talked a lot about expectations and baseline and 12-team playoff, but when you talk about a ceiling for this team, what comes to mind in terms of best case scenarios that could flash through your brain?
Having the best offense in the country, roll in through the regular season 11-1, beating either Alabama or Georgia, and going to the SEC championship game and winning it. That's the best case scenario. They are, in their mind, far more upgraded defensively in the front than anyone's going to give them credit for. All the focus is on how much they lost on the back end. I'm focused on that. And then they had the nickel go down in fall camp, so I'm focused on that. I don't know how long we'll have to wait to the middle point of the season to maybe see that exposed. NC State folks think they have the wide receiver core to expose that. It's just tough before you've gotten proof of performance from them, because they never throw the ball well. So will we see it in week 2? I don't know. But that's the best case. The most likely to me is like a 9-3 season. And if you go 9-3 in the SEC with their schedule, you got a multiple big boys on your schedule. You go to Oklahoma as well. That is fringe to probably just in the playoff bubble, as I see the playoff bubble. And then I keep going back to this. I keep going back to like the pro sports model of, if you've got an expanded playoff, then you start talking about teams that have gotten hot that no one wants to see when you get to the last month of your regular season. We've never had that conversation in college football. We have it now. Tennessee's like the quintessential potential, good band name, the quintessential potential team you don't want to see because they just got hot with Nico Iamaleava with a full year now of starting experience under his belt by that time in November.
I got $20 says that's already a band name.
Hey, Josh Pate's college football was already taken, and we took care of that.
No, it wasn't.
and for that matter, some dude already scooped up late kick Josh and put a picture of Dwight Schrute as his profile picture. Which I can't be mad at.
Something about that seems fitting. I'm not sure why.
I'm strangely okay with it.
The internet works quickly.
So
Josh Pate hanging out here with us in studio.
I know you get people excited, myself included, when you say 11-1 in SEC
you started
championship.
scratching your neck over there.
My
You
heart
broke out in hives.
started fluttering a little bit.
Did you undo your bottom button?
Well, there's one more progressively throughout the show. But this is a team that I would say its best player is on defense. Its best unit is on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Its deepest unit is on defense. So could you have a situation where Tennessee has a top 3 offense in the country, yet still its best overall unit is on the defensive side of the ball? Like, do both of those things have to happen in order for them to get close to that ceiling that you're talking about?
Clearly to get close to the ceiling. And then, so the way it worked a couple of years ago was they were the number 1 offense in the country and opportunistically like top 20 to top 30 defensively, depending on what metric you looked at. There's certainly no world, nor does there need to be one, where Tennessee's defense flirts with like top 10 status this year. But if you give me a top 5-ish offense, and then you have the kind of defense that maybe gives up stuff between the 20s, but those havoc rate numbers, those advanced stat numbers that everyone loves now, if those things spike for them, in a best case scenario, that's how they're in Atlanta. And people are finding themselves in December saying, why didn't I see this coming? Like, all these guys were in my preview magazine. Why didn't I see this coming?
What's the name of the tour this year?
The Whole New Saturday Tour.
The Whole New Saturday Tour.
Or you could say A Whole New Saturday Tour if you really want to dive into the Aladdin theme.
I mean, I suppose we could. I have some jokes. I don't know if I could make them here, but we'll figure that out.
You just can't.
We'll figure that. I mean, I think I'm the most qualified to make those jokes, but that's a conversation for another day. Why is Miami at the Swamp the most important game this week?
Well, it is the most important. It's the most important story in the college football version of the draft, which is recruiting. The state of Florida has always held the key to competitive balance in college football. Everyone thought it was expanding the playoff. That's nonsense. It's always been the lack of the ability for Miami, Florida, and Florida State to keep big-time talent home. Case in point, Alabama wins a national championship in 2020, I believe. Their entire secondary was from South Florida. And it was Bama being able to do what they were doing because the teams in Florida weren't able to do what they're supposed to do. Ditto, Clemson, ditto, Ohio State. The teams that have dominated with athletes from Florida. So the part one of that is, if Miami's getting better, if Florida is getting better, if Florida State's getting better, hopefully for the sake of competitive balance, that means they're keeping more of their talent home. You don't have to lock it down. Just keep more of it home. Part two is, you could invite your mom or your sister who don't even care about college football to watch this game just by explaining how toxic the storyline is around the head coaches and how uncomfortable it's about to be tenfold for whoever loses this game. And I ran it by Stats and Info, and they tell me someone does have to lose Saturday. It's a 2.5-point line. Miami's slightly favored. My numbers virtually agree with it. I've got like Miami -2. So I also have Florida in a power rating as the number 21 team in the country. Like, it's not a bad team. They're just, with a unworkable schedule, not expected to do anything. So I, unlike a lot of people, think there's way more heat on Napier than Mario Cristobal going into this one. Because I could easily see a world where this is a knife fight. Florida wins 22-19. And Miami's offense was really shaky. It's a new quarterback, new transfer portal pieces on the road, toughest environment they'll play in all year. They could lose that game and then go on and go 11-1 and win the ACC. Florida loses this game. That's inevitably one of several losses that are coming down the road for them. And as much as I like Billy Napier as a guy, as good as he's been to us, and as much as I believe he could build a winner, you're probably just finding yourself in an untenable position at that point, like beyond the point of repair with your fan base. It's Lucas said during the break, in what world would you have been able to tell the Florida fan base, in year 3, if you go 7-5, you'll view that as a win? Like, they would have never accepted that.
When you talk about the key to, basically the lifeblood of college football still being recruiting and the difficulties, there are advantages obviously with the transfer portal and the name, image, and likeness stuff, but the difficulties of balancing that and roster building in a way that's viable. Which coach do you think has the right balance right now in today's college football heading into this season?
Anywhere in college football?
Anywhere in college football.
Kirby. Kirby gets it. Kirby is in a position, first off, where they're not desperate. They were already one of, if not the premier programs in college football before the worms started to turn on the NIL and portal front. But also, it's kind of like when Saban was at Alabama, and Bama's still kind of like this, believe it or not. They're in a position where the value they offer you by playing there and putting that G or putting that, script A on your uniform, wherever it is, that has such intrinsic value, they don't have to overpay. I know this market pretty well. They are never the highest bidder for players they get, which flies in the face of conventional wisdom, which tells you, they're just out there buying every player. No, they're actually paying far less for every player, because a lot of guys realize, I go play at Alabama, I get to tell folks I played at Alabama. Like, I get NFL scouts know I played at Alabama, ditto at Georgia. But also, Kirby's taken a principled stance that even if I can afford to do it, I don't want to do it. I don't have to do it. I don't feel like I need to do it. I don't want to do it. I'm going to lightly sprinkle out of the portal. Trevor Etienne will be their number one tailback this year. They got him out of the portal. So there are exceptions to that, but they are going to build 90+% of that starting rotation out of traditional recruiting and development. They believe they do it differently than anyone in the country. Everyone else believes that too. Georgia believes it, but they practice it. And so when you turn on your TV and watch them against Clemson Saturday, think about this. Georgia is the number 2 roster in the country, talent-wise right now, per the 24/7 talent composite. Clemson's supposedly number 5. There's a 2-touchdown gap in the point spread between those two teams. So I'd say Georgia's pretty well got it figured out.
What is Clemson football right now?
In a state of flux. They're in a prove-it year, which is wild because that guy's won 2 national titles, and yet he's in a prove-it year. I say that. I want to say it as respectfully and with as much context as possible. Dabo Swinney, if he never won another game, is one of the best to ever do it to me. Like, he's a Hall of Famer to me. His legacy's already written. Having said that, if you're just telling me start now and look down the road, forget about what the past says, this is a guy who, on one hand, I respect immensely, and on the other hand, I question. I respect that when he talks about the portal and not using it, he's doing it because it's a principled stance of his. It doesn't matter if you're driving around Gallatin right now and you agree with it or not. I don't even completely agree with it. But I respect that he's got a value, he's got a principle, and he's sticking to it when compromising it would probably put him in a better position short term. So there's that. Having said that, other teams he's got to compete against are using that. So you're voluntarily putting one of your hands behind your back by saying, I'm not going to use the portal because I don't want to use the portal. And I think you either do one of two things. You either settle into Clemson being a good, solid 8 or 9 win program with a top-end potential every few years, or you've got to make changes philosophically because there's probably no other way to stay at the top of this sport consistently every year than to somewhat, in his case, begrudgingly use the transfer portal. He uses semantics all the time to talk about it. The bottom line is he's opposed to using it. And if that's the way it is, that's the way it is, but you're probably going to have to adjust expectation. Again, 2-touchdown underdog on a neutral site to Georgia to start the year.
Josh Pate is hanging out in studio with us. We're going to ask him about Michigan as the defending national champion. We're also going to ask him about the Connor Stallions doc coming up next.